Well, welcome everyone to our webinar today, the third part of our series, Buying Your First Warehouse. I'm joined by Matt and Steve, as always. Matt and Steve, thank you so much for joining us today to take us through this show.
Thanks, Soren. Good morning.
Morning, Soren.
How are we going, guys? I know lockdown's been extended now for a couple more weeks. Everyone doing okay?
Yeah, we're all doing fine. We're just battling away and dealing with it as we should.
Awesome. Well, look, just as we do at the start of every one of our webinars, please send through your questions or suggestions to digital@tsimos.com.au. We do monitor that as a team. Today's webinar is probably about 15 minutes, exploring the third part in that series. As I said, what we've covered in this series so far, if you haven't seen the show, is essentially positioning yourself to buy your first warehouse. How to choose the right property, so you can go back on our YouTube channel and actually check out those two webinars. They were recorded. And today's all about making the best long-term decision. Now, we've got a couple of examples to go through today, which is pretty exciting. But yeah, as we said earlier, if you do have any questions or suggestions, please send them through to digital@Tsimos. We'll be more than happy to answer them. All right, Matt and Steve. So look, let's have a look at that. We were talking, obviously, for the audience about the idea of making sure that you've structured yourself right to purchase a property, depending on what your goals and aspirations are, whether that be for your owner-occupier or a potential investment. And today we wanted to run through a couple of examples of some potential long-term investments when it comes to buying your first warehouse. Let's have a chat about 28 to 36 Japati Street, Mordialloc, and what makes that a great opportunity for the different buyer types.
Go ahead, Matt.
Well, look, I think Japati Street offers benefits in the way that you can purchase a property now, pay your deposit. It gives you lots of lead time to organise your finance for later on. It'll settle in about 6 months' time. It also gives you time to find a tenant in advance, which is always good. There's no downtime, there's no vacancy time during that. That's the idea anyway. But it also offers you as an investor, obviously, depreciation and a host of other opportunities for tax and benefits, etc.
Because at the moment, if we look at this opportunity, this is really buying off the plan, if you like, similar to buying, I guess,
correct,
a house off the plan or an apartment off the plan. In this instance here as well, we look at some of those things about brand new, low maintenance. Obviously, that is a huge consideration in terms of the different buyer types as well. But when we look at considerations here of the owners corporation, what does that really mean? Why is that a consideration inside the property, Steve?
Well, this type of product's been very popular over the last 10 years or so, and there's been thousands of these types of buildings built in the industrial sector. And of course, because they're a strata title or a body corporate setup, there are additional fees, common area maintenance. One of the benefits of that is insurance, and in that the body corporate takes out insurance for all the buildings, and as a result, in general terms, the insurance cover would be lower per unit than it would be if you owned a freehold or a standalone building. But a lot of some people don't like body corporates, but those particular type of developments have been absolutely wonderful in terms of leasing, in terms of capital growth from when they started 10 or 15 years ago. So, it's a good long-term investment, very low maintenance, and you would expect probably a lower yield because of that. So you're not really spending any money on the property in terms of maintenance and what have you. And again, very popular. Now, we've sold, how many have we sold?
I think they've become more and more popular these days, because I think you can buy them a little bit cheaper than your freehold. And because there's more and more of them coming on, people can buy them off the plan and be ready. So people are becoming more and more comfortable with the idea of buying into a body corporate these days.
Yeah, agreed.
Understood. And what's the typical type of tenant? I mean, I know it's a hard one to ask, but what's a typical type of, I guess, tenant or owner that this really suits? Is it...
Well, I think generally, and I'll stand corrected by Matt, but I think you'll find that something like 50 to 60% of these properties are generally sold to owner-occupiers and the balance to investors. So in terms of tenancies, it can be warehousing, importing, it could be light manufacturing, office showroom, all sorts of different uses. So
yeah, understood.
And certainly the big one at the moment is obviously small trades. plumbers and builders, etc., wanting to occupy them for office and warehouse storage.
Yep. So let's look at the finances of that then. So for this, we've taken a unit which is 309 square meters. Talk us through the numbers here, Matt, in terms of the opportunity that was presented for this property. I know is this one that we have listed at the moment, or one that was recently sold?
Unit 3 has just been recently sold. We still do have Unit 2 and 4 in that block, which is essentially the exact same property.
Yeah.
So,
and these are the ones that are actually fronting the street. They're not sort of down.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. So they are obviously, I think, going to be in a little bit more demand. They've got a bit more exposure.
Yeah.
Slightly bigger than the back of the block. You will have better access points. They've all got their own driveways. They've got parking in front of them. Signage wise, obviously, street exposure. I think they've certainly got the benefits of the entire block to them. So price $865. Obviously, you've got your stamp duty, your legals, your total at around that $913,000, and we would expect a rental yield of around the $45,000 to $46,000, $47,000 mark, depending on how many there are vacant and what time of year has been rented. A yield of around that 5% at the moment, I think, is pretty normal.
Yeah. And is this pretty typical for the general size that you'd find in that area and pricing that you'd find in that area at the moment, or?
Yeah, between 150 to 350 is I would say, almost like the sweet spot. Okay. And we're certainly getting a lot of inquiry from both owner-occupiers, investors, tenants, everyone wanting to be in that size. I mean, that size, when you're starting from 100 up to 300 or 400, there's always someone coming up. There's always someone coming down. Yeah. There's always showrooms looking to come into industrial. There's always tradies. As I said, it's a sweet spot of you're always going to have someone looking.
And that's interesting. And I mean, it's a really good example to then, I guess, move into what another opportunity in the same area. And I think this is a similar size. Is that right? From
this one's a little bit bigger.
Bigger.
But you are looking at, obviously, it's a little bit bigger, but it's freehold. Okay. So obviously, and it's a complete flip side. It needs a little bit of attention. It's quite original. So you will have a bit of upkeep, maintenance costs over the years. It will cost a little bit more to buy in. And when you buy, you will have to be ready in terms of your finance. You don't have 6 months to play with. Generally, because there's more interest in these, they want 30, 60, 90-day settlements. So you will have to be ready to go on these sort of properties. But in the long term, you will definitely reap that benefit in a little bit more capital growth.
And the potential to add value, to redevelop.
Absolutely.
Improve it cosmetically, potentially raise the roof if need be. So there's a lot of upside, and you're not going to be dealing with a body corporate where you've got limitations as to what you can do with the front of the building, and indeed with the building itself in terms of improving it. So the thing about a freehold is you're buying a freehold title, so you're in charge of the whole property, and you can do what you like with it, subject obviously to council regulations and rules. But there are upsides and there are downsides. Well, not so much a downside, but there are other considerations for, as Matt did say, ongoing maintenance. I mean, the building's 35 years old or 40 years old. So, these are issues that will come up from time to time. So on the one hand, you've got things like Japati Street, that type of development, which is almost a set and forget. You're not going to have much maintenance. You get a tenant in there and it's clean, it's done, it's finished. In this one, you're going to have ongoing sort of issues, gutters, roofs, whatever. Again, it depends on what type of investment you want in the long term. So, and it varies from person to person.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, if you look at those sort of two different areas there, from essentially off the plan, as you said, Steve, clean, neat, I'm moving my business, I just want to get in and get the job done and get back to work. Here, you may have a little bit more complexity, but that may also, I guess, lean towards people that need more tailorization or customization of the area or the space for what they're trying to do as well. Which is interesting. I mean, the typical type of buyer or purchaser that you see of these opportunities, What does that person look like? I mean, I know it's, again, very difficult in general terms to think about that, but what's someone really looking for when they purchase this type of property?
Well,
Look, I think this freehold opportunity and an older style freehold opportunity is someone who is probably a bit more experienced,
Okay.
probably a bit more cashed up and ready to get their hands dirty and actually put a bit of money into that building and put their own stamp on it, create it into something that that is more modern, but also, wanting to maybe more customize something for their own business.
Yeah.
So it really depends on, do you want that set and forget, minimal fuss, or do you want something that you can spend a bit of money on and obviously create a bit more capital growth for the future?
Yeah, and this is great for the audience as well, because when you go into real commercial and you're having a look at the different properties and opportunities, it's important to note these little nuances that define or are going to set what those prices are. When
more opportunity, though, obviously can also mean more buyers. So obviously those freehold properties, they provide a bit more opportunity, a bit more flexibility. You're going to have more buyers in the market looking for them.
Yeah, and look, we know that we're just using some general term examples here, and this property did recently sell, but at the time we did the numbers here, we were looking predominantly at what the market expectation was for that as well.
Correct.
I mean, talk us through the numbers here. So obviously a little bit higher in the price for the investment and lower in the yield. What are we really seeing there, Matt?
Well, you're seeing that price of the expectation of price is about 980, just under $1 million. By the time you add in your stamp duty, your legals, a bit over $1 million, $1,035,000. Your rental yield, as it stands in its current state, obviously will be a little bit lower, and that yield will reflect that. But if you were to buy this and then, as I said, renovate it, put your stamp on it, upgrade that office, make sure everything's clean, obviously your rental's going to go up. Yeah. But you've got to get to that stage.
Yeah, and that's where you were saying that this type of property might suit a more enabled investor, if that's the best way to put it, who's looking to get some money in, obviously up that yield, but also look at that, I guess, short-term and potentially long-term capital growth of something that they can build and grow from as the areas change as well.
Correct.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen examples of this with the rezoning of areas and bits and pieces in other pockets within Melbourne. Is Morty Alex sort of fairly industrial in that sense, or is there the potential for things like office and those sorts of things in the future?
Yeah, there's sort of potential for a little bit of office, but I mean, the zoning here is industrial, and I can't see this particular street changing. We've seen other streets around Morty Alex that are on the fringe of industrial, commercial too, and residential, and they become a mixed use zone. But you are very limited in those properties.
Yeah, understood as well. All right, so look, I guess for us, I mean, hopefully we've created that clear difference between the two opportunities that exist in buying your first warehouse. So, Steve, to summarise it, I mean, how are they different investment opportunities in your mind in a sentence?
Well, in terms of investors, it's quite simple, as I'm sort of repeating myself, but Japati Street type properties are brand new. You've got good depreciation allowances, which offset your tax on your income, minimal maintenance, if any, and they're always in high demand leasing wise. We've found that the capital gain in this type of property over the years has been very good, particularly over the last perhaps 8 or 10 years. The difference with the Spray Avenue property is that you're buying a freehold and effectively you're buying a block of land with a building on it, whereas in a strata development, you're really just buying that piece of that strata development. Yes, there's land underneath it, but you can't do anything with it other than walk over the concrete floor, But with something like Spray Avenue down the track, as land values increase and have been increasing exponentially over the last few years, the land becomes more valuable than the land and the building in some cases. So that's the difference. One's a little easier to look after, easier to manage, easier to lease, and the other one needs a bit of TLC. But at the end of the day, both opportunities will present reasonably good returns and capital gains prospects.
Yeah, it's just a great distinction there. I mean, if we pull that to residential as an example, the difference between an apartment and a home, you know, completely the same thing there. Two totally different investment opportunities, and obviously both having that same return. But look, thank you, Matt and Steve, so much for taking us through this series. Look, I guess for the audience here, keep up to date with our webinars on YouTube. We'll share a link with everyone, so hopefully everyone's receiving our emails. We'll share a link out there. And as always, if you do want to get in touch with Steve or Matt, their contact details are below. Gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you again.
Thanks, Soren. Thanks very much.
Soren.
Stay safe, everyone.